Everyone knows summons make Elden Ring easier. Some might even say they make the game play itself. Today, I decided to see just how easy they make the game by trying to beat the entire game just using summons. Oh, wait a minute. Several people already did that? I see. Well, today I'm going to beat Elden Ring only using random summons. And hopefully that's different enough for the algorithm. It was different enough for me. Alright, let's talk the rules and quirks of this challenge. Obviously, I want to do 0 damage the entire run. No weapons, no damaging spells, nothing. Anywhere possible, I want to use the summons to do the damage, especially for bosses. To facilitate this, I installed a mod, linked below, which greatly expands where you can summon, and allows you to re-summon mid-fight if needed. While I want to avoid re-summoning as much as possible, because summons are random, some summons simply can't beat some bosses with only a single try. On that note, the other goal is to avoid as many failures as possible. A failure is essentially when the random summon I rolled can't beat a boss, no matter what. This is somewhat subjective, but it'll make more sense later in the video. Of course, we can't forget the most important rule of the entire challenge. What's the point? The goal of this challenge run is not simply to beat the game, but to beat every remembered boss. This does mean we're going to have to take on the ones that are otherwise going to be a lot more difficult only using summons, such as Melania and Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. Now let's talk some of the quirks that I've had to deal with. First, this mod greatly expands where you can summon, but there are still sizable dead zones. This can be a problem if there's a required fight in a dead zone, so at times I've had to resort to some fairly cheese methods to deal with those fights, sometimes using Reflect, sometimes summoning outside of the area and then just walking in, which doesn't despawn the summons. Lastly, there are 2 summons which don't work in the open world, the rats and the land squirts. These summons have fixed spawn points in boss arenas, so they don't summon properly in the open world, at least with this mod. Finally, as you may notice, I've done this challenge on a new game +1, rather than a fully fresh new game. This both makes the playthrough easier and harder, and is probably the most controversial decision I've made, so far at least. I have access to some powerful support spells early on, which you'll see, as well as all of my summons leveled up to +9 or +10. But all the bosses are scaled up in health and damage. The reason I chose to do a New Game Plus rather than a new game ultimately was I wanted to have all of the summons right at the start. So that way I can really roll any of them for any of these early bosses. I feel like it made the challenge more dynamic, and with the higher boss health, it certainly still, I think, almost balances out, though I'll admit it is probably at least easier in the early game, though harder in the late game. Alright, that's plenty of talk about the challenge setup. Let's go ahead and jump in and see how we actually did this. Leaving the chapel, I rolled Cleanrot Knight Finley first, and decided to go ahead and fight the tree sentinel for fun. This fight was surprisingly close, which signaled to me maybe this run wasn't as easy as I expected. Undeterred, I ran on, met my future wife, and set off on my first objective, which wasn't actually a specific boss, but to go and meet Ranni. The reason was simple. There are 2 summons I actually don't have access to yet, because I couldn't get them on my first regular run. In order to get them, I have to go talk to Selvius, get his potion, and give it to the Dung Eater. On the way to Ranni, I decided to use the marionette soldiers and fight an Erdtree avatar for fun.
They're obliterating the boss.
They're not really dodging though. Probably after. Eventually, I did make it to Carrion Manor, and mostly ran through using my summons to fight enemies, and ignoring anything I could. This seems like good a time as any to talk about when and how I reroll summons. After using a summon to beat anything major, being an area with significant combat or a boss, I'm going to roll a new summon and switch them out. This actually caused a pretty significant problem, as when I got to the boss room for Lorreta, I rolled Noble Sorcerer. This ended up being the first failure of the run, as is pretty obvious to see in the below footage. Oh, he does not got this. This is going to be the 5 or 10 death rule in both for sure. He is 42 damage. He gets staggered in 1 hit. Dude, this guy can. Once it was clear that this sorcerer was not going to be able to beat Lorreta, I took the failure, bringing the count up to 1, and rerolled into the Avionette soldiers. This made the fight much easier, and allowed me to meet Ranni, Selvius, and get his potion. To progress further, I would need to fight some bosses to get to the capital and free the Dung Eater. So I went back to Limgrave and took down Stormveil Castle. Things went great at first. The perfumer Caraman was able to deal with Margit on the first try. Use the fire! Okay, but hit him, please. There we go. That was first try. Alright. After rushing through the main gate of the castle, the Lone Wolves, somewhat surprisingly, also took down Godrick first try. Still, I think this is going well. I guess this guy's just kind of an easier boss.
And I died to him like 3 times.
I mean, to be fair, you weren't +9 wolves. And they've actually already died to him 3 times. I think I took a couple tries on him. I think it might have even been 10 or 15. I think it was like 10. With this resounding success, I decided to head off to the lakes to fight my next shard bearer. I stole a key from a dragon and then progressed to the academy. My Radagon soldiers took care of the Red Wolf. Where's my archery? Oh. Too many fucking spells. Nice. Man, I didn't really. Then I was off to fight the Queen of the Moon, having rolled Banished Knight in Govel. Little did I know, I was about to walk into the hardest fight of the run so far. This fight is typically one of the easiest in Elden Ring. However, for this specific challenge, it proved very difficult. And, well, the below footage really speaks for itself. Brother, the queen is down. Come get her. Marshad, I found a problem.
Let's hope.
He won't get to the queen in time. He is so distracted that the only window he has to kill the queen, he does not hit her. Even after discovering the cursed blood pot, which forces your summons to target whoever you throw it at, I was getting nowhere. I still needed FP for the second phase. After 4 more failures, I called it quits for the night, knowing I'd need to change my strategy somehow in order to beat this boss. I decided to take a detour and get the Golden Vow spell, not knowing that I already had the spell I needed to beat this boss fight. To do this, I went ahead and got both halves of the Dectus Medallion. You got him, dude, you got him. Chill out. Chill out. You got him. Dude, chill. You got him. Damn. Went up to the Altus Plateau and used Raya to fast travel to Volcano Manor.
Take my hand. Give me your hand. I will pray.
Sure thing. From here, I ran out to grab a Golden Vow, and Anastasia conveniently jumped off a cliff. Seriously, I was going to reflect cheese her off the cliff, but she just jumped off of her own free will. She did it herself. Wait, I didn't even knock her. Back to Raya Lucaria, I rolled the demi-human ashes and made a huge discovery. Reflect, which does 0 damage, but still counts as a hit on the NPCs I needed to unshield the queen. Oh, huge! This was a massive, massive success, and while it still took a while, I was eventually able to beat the queen. They're already here. I don't need to use a pot. Oh, I think they got her. Let's go! Phase 2 for the first time. Oh my god. Where'd you fucking go? Oh, well. Like, I want to use rejection, but I'm worried that... Ooh, good hit. Well, I think they're gonna get her. They're gonna get her. Let's go! I foolishly thought this might be the longest fight of the run, but boy was I wrong. I was now ready to go to the capital, but to do so I would need to beat the Draconic Tree Sentinel, and I had just rolled the Soul Jars of Fortune, and I knew they were not going to cut it. I decided to go back and beat Patches, as this counts as a boss, which allowed me to re-roll into the Lone Wolves. However, I thought I could do better, and I decided to use the wolves to beat Margit outside the capital. There we go. This fight was a success, but the consequences were a disaster. My greed really punished me here, and I rolled into the jellyfish ashes. While I did go ahead and give this fight a try, it was nowhere near a success. I next rolled the Man Serpent Ashes, and I thought this would be an easy win against their Draconic Tree Sentinel, and while it was vastly better than the jellyfish, I was surprised to find that it just simply did not have the damage to beat the Tree Sentinel, and I realized I did not have enough flasks to just make this fight work at all. The Serpent was staggered too easily, the Tree Sentinel was too aggressive. Luckily, my third try was with the Azula Beastmen, and they made short work of the Tree Sentinel, letting me into the capital. Nice! Inside the capital, I grabbed a Seedbed Curse, beeline to the sewers to rescue the Dung Eater, and made my way back outside. Here, I needed to kill the Dung Eater invader. This proved quite difficult, as summons were disabled at this area, and a giant crab kept spawning, which was preventing me from reflect cheesing him off the cliff. It eventually worked, as I was able to sneak around the crab and knock him off the cliff without worrying about being harassed by a massive crab putting me to sleep. Knocked him off the cliff. And it finally allowed me to feed him the potion that we got way back at the beginning from Selvius. Since I was in the sewers, I decided to use the Crystallian Ashes to beat Mogh the Omen. It did take 2 tries, but nothing of note there.
A surprise tool that can help us later.
Finally, I was able to go back and buy the Dung Eater Ashes from Selvius, meaning I was only missing Soloris the Sleeping Arrow. To get these ashes, I need to finish Ranni's quest, which meant beating Radahn. As I expected, this fight was really quite easy. I have a ton of buff spells I can use on the multitude of free summons you get this fight. Nothing was required really on my part. Low health regen, like a couple points per second. Whoa! And it's helping my horse. I need more suns.
Joke's on you! Your spells get parried. Oh. I got the dagger palace, but holy shit, let's go. I've been needing that. Is the right one?
Yep, alright, that was pretty easy. This allowed me to enter Nocron and fight the next boss, Mimic Tier. The Mimic posed no real threat to me, however, I had rolled the Archer Spirit Ashes. This fight took, no joke, over 30 real-life minutes. This is because the Mimic Tier can dodge away from the Archer's arrows. Here is the entire fight. Of course, sped up, not insane. With that miserable slog out of the way, I quickly ignored every enemy and grabbed the Finger Slayer blade, then decided to take on the Regal Ancestor spirit. While my hopes were high for the Caden Sellsword I had rolled, he was rapidly disappointing me, as despite his high damage, his AI was incredibly passive and stupid, seemingly only moving to attack when walking through the fire.
For a limited time only.
I didn't mean anything by shooting you. It's just a sport.
Because pretty simple.
Despite his incredibly disappointing performance, he still did take down the spirit, and I moved on to the next boss.
So useless. You're so useless. I'm begging you, do anything on your own. Be less than literally. I'm wondering if the soul jars of Oh my god. This guy's D tier. Easily D tier.
My next summon was the Skeletal Militia Ashes, and I knew they couldn't take on Ranni's next boss, so I went ahead and fought Godfrey. This also took longer than expected, as Godfrey was smart enough to kill the skeletons while they respawned, but progress was steady and I was eventually able to bring him down first try.
Bro, am I in a different...
Back kill him, thank you. You missed. Okay. That was weird. They got him. Yeah, I knew it was impossible just to build miserable.
Since I rolled Ancestral Follower as my next summon, I went ahead and cleared Miriam, and progressed Ranni's quest until my next major hurdle. Definitely not Blaidd.
Nice. Good job.
This fight was especially difficult, as you could not summon in his boss arena, meaning that if my summon died, it was essentially doomed. I had to go die and retry. However, luck smiled on me, and I rolled the Skeletal Bandit, who naturally revives when downed. I still needed Relentless Reflect Stunning, but this was probably one of the most fun fights I'd had so far, and very stressful, as I knew if I did anything wrong, Blaidd could go ahead and kill my Spirit Ashes, ending it right then and there.
Was one of the summons be good though. One or two good hits.
Beautifully fought. My thanks.
Really?
'Twas more of a challenge than I
That beautifully
envisioned.
fought?
Now I can finally stand before them. This is farewell, my dear. Tell Blaidd and E.G. I love them.
I really don't think that was beautifully fought.
Next, I finally got to fight Astel, who ended up causing the most failures since Rennala. This was not actually due to the boss difficulty, but rather the AI's pathfinding in such a huge arena, which was certainly not a good omen for the Elden Beast. The arena was so large, my summon spent most of the time either not aggroed on the boss, or running to the boss, making pretty much any melee summon not possible, due to the sheer number of flasks that would be required to eventually chip damage the boss to death. While I expected my savior to be something like the Page Ashes, I finally high-rolled the new Dung Eater Ashes I had upgraded, and while the fight was close, he was eventually able to defeat the menace that was Astel.
I don't fear you.
Then you will die braver than most.
Instant domain boost. Yeah, it really does.
Next, I quickly finished Ranni's quest, essentially for fun, as we're not doing her ending, and I finally decided to fight the final boss of part 1 of this series, Morgott. I was able to summon my wife to help, even though I'm divorcing her in part 2 of this series, and together with the Haligtree Soldier Ashes, the last of all kings was quickly felled.
Let's go.
And that brings us to the end of part 1 of this series, but of course, plenty is still to go. Next time, we'll hopefully beat the final boss of the game, as well as the harder optional bosses like Mogh and Malenia. Please let me know if you enjoyed the kind of video editing style I've done with this video. Anything you'd want changed in the next one? Do you want more of the fights in their entirety? Or do you prefer the kind of edited versions I have here so that the videos don't end up 3 hours long? Let me know down in the comments. If the next part is out already, it should be on screen right now. Otherwise, sorry, you'll have to wait. And I don't want to know how long, because I haven't even done the rest of the game yet. Could take another couple weeks, could take, who knows.